Level 1, Software Engineer. In 2026, the most coveted job on the planet is not on Wall Street. It's in a building with no windows in Austin, Texas, where 30-year-old engineers earn more than Goldman Sachs partners, and they are building the technology that is going to replace everyone else. This is xAI, Elon Musk's artificial intelligence company. The place where Grok was born. The place where, depending on who you ask, humanity's future is either being secured or quietly dismantled. And today, we're going to walk through every rank inside that machine, from the entry-level engineer pulling $170,000 in their first year, all the way to the inner circle building what some of them, in their own internal documents, have called the last invention humanity will ever need to make. 6 levels. 6 lives. Let's start at the bottom. You graduated from Carnegie Mellon 2 years ago. You turned down Google. You turned down Meta. You even turned down a very generous offer from Jane Street that your parents still bring up at Thanksgiving. Instead, you signed with xAI, and for the first 6 months, you genuinely wondered if you made a mistake. Not because of the money. The money is obscene for someone your age. Your base salary lands at $185,000. On top of that, you've got an equity grant, unvested xAI stock that, at the company's last private valuation, puts your total first-year compensation somewhere around $310,000. You live in Austin. You have a 2-bedroom apartment in the Domain that costs $2,200 a month. After taxes, after rent, after the mandatory contribution to the 401k that HR explained to you 3 times before you understood it, you are still saving more money per month than your parents made combined in an entire year at your age. So no, it's not the money. It's the pace. On your first week, you were handed a codebase with no documentation and told to ship a feature by Friday. Not ship. The culture at xAI doesn't really have an onboarding philosophy. It has a sink or swim philosophy wrapped in a slide deck that says, you either figure out how to keep up or you don't. The attrition rate in your first year is something nobody puts in writing, but everyone on your team knows the number. Your actual workday looks like this. You're in Slack by 8 a.m. You're writing code by 8:15. Lunch is optional, not in the way corporate companies say lunch is optional while absolutely expecting you to take it, but genuinely optional. Some of your teammates eat at their desks. Some don't eat at all. One of them has a meal replacement subscription that he swears has given him an extra productive hour per day. You do not endorse this. You eat lunch. You are working on infrastructure, specifically the distributed training systems that let Grok process the scale of data it needs to run. You are not working on Grok directly. You are not in the room where the model decisions get made. But you are building the pipes that everything else flows through, and some days that feels essential, and some days it feels like being the person who installed the plumbing in the Sistine Chapel. Necessary, invisible, and not what anyone's going to write about in the history books. The thing nobody tells you before you join a frontier AI lab is how strange it is to work somewhere where the stated mission, and this is printed on the wall, it's in the company all hands, it's in the job posting you applied to, is to not to increase shareholder value, not to dominate a market, to understand the universe. You can spend an entire Thursday debugging a CUDA memory allocation issue, and then walk past a whiteboard where someone has written out an equation that, if the person who wrote it is right, will change what it means to be intelligent. Not to dominate a market, to understand the universe. You can spend an entire Thursday debugging a CUDA memory allocation issue, and then walk past a whiteboard where someone has written out an equation that, if the person who wrote it is right, will change what it means to be intelligent. These things coexist. It's disorienting in a way that is very hard to explain to people who work normal jobs. Your equity cliff hits at month 12. The day your first tranche vests, you check the implied valuation on your phone approximately 11 times. You are not ashamed of this. You are 24 years old, and your net worth just increased by more than most Americans make in a decade. You text your mom. She asks if you're eating enough vegetables. You tell her yes. You are not eating enough vegetables. Level 2, Senior Software Engineer. You are 31. You have been in tech long enough to remember when a $200,000 salary meant you had made it. That was 5 years ago. Now $200,000 is what xAI pays people who are still figuring out where the bathrooms are. At level 5, you are no longer just building the pipes. You are designing them. You own systems. You have incidents attributed to your name in the post-mortem documents, both the ones you caused and the ones you fixed at 2 a.m. on a Sunday while your roommate played video games 15 feet away. You have opinions about architecture that people actually listen to. Junior engineers DM you with questions. You answer them usually when you have time, which is less often than you'd like. Your total compensation this year will be somewhere around $620,000. Say that number out loud for a second. $620,000. You have been in the workforce for 9 years. Your high school friends, the ones who went into law, into medicine, into finance, into teaching, earn between $70,000 and $280,000 depending on what they chose. The lawyer who was valedictorian makes $310,000 at a firm in Chicago and works 70-hour weeks and hates it. You work 60-hour weeks and feel something that is not quite happiness, but is adjacent to it. The equity component of your package is where it gets genuinely absurd. You have accumulated xAI shares across 3 grant cycles. You are not a billionaire. You are not even close to a billionaire. But you have enough unvested equity that, on days when the private market valuation ticks up in secondary trading data, you idly calculate what your holdings would be worth at various liquidity scenarios. And then you close the spreadsheet because it's not real until it's real. And you've seen enough people lose their minds staring at paper wealth that you've decided this is a psychological trap you are not going to fall into. At this level, you are starting to exist at the intersection of technology and strategy. You get invited to architecture reviews, where the decisions made affect not just how fast Grok runs, but what Grok can do. You understand, in a way you didn't at level 3, that the technical decisions and the product decisions and the safety decisions are not separate things. They are the same thing, expressed in different languages. A choice about how to allocate compute is also a choice about which capabilities get developed first. A choice about data sourcing is also a choice about what values get baked into a model at the lowest level. Nobody explicitly tells you this. You figure it out by sitting in enough rooms. The burnout question is real at this level. You know people, good people, smart people, people who shipped things you genuinely admired, who left frontier labs after 3 or 4 years not because something went wrong, but because something went right. They accumulated enough money that the marginal value of one more year no longer outweighed the cost of one more year. They bought houses in Portugal. They started investing. They took long trips to Japan. You wonder sometimes if you will be one of those people. You are not one of those people yet. Level 3, Staff Engineer. This is the level where the number crosses $1 million. Total compensation, inclusive of salary, equity, and bonuses. $1 million per year. The person earning this has a name that appears in internal systems next to the words technical lead, or research lead, or sometimes just a project name that everyone on the relevant team recognizes. At this level, you are no longer measured by what you build. You are measured by what you make possible. The distinction sounds abstract. It is not abstract. A staff engineer at xAI is someone who identifies problems that don't have names yet, proposes solutions that didn't exist 6 months ago, and then builds the environment, the teams, the tools, the technical foundations in which those solutions can actually happen. You are multiplying the output of everyone around you. Your individual code contribution is, compared to 2 levels ago, almost irrelevant. Your judgment is the product. If you're on the research track, you are a research scientist working on the models themselves. You have a PhD, probably from MIT, Stanford, Cambridge, ETH Zurich, or Carnegie Mellon. You have published papers that were cited before you graduated. You are not publishing as many papers now, because the work you do at xAI is largely proprietary, which creates a strange professional tension. You are doing some of the most consequential research in your field, and you cannot tell most of your field that you are doing it. Your academic friends find this alternately fascinating and ethically questionable. You have had this conversation many times. You no longer find it entirely comfortable. Your day-to-day, if you're in research, you spend a lot of time in front of loss curves. You run experiments that take days of compute to complete, and then spend an afternoon reading the results and trying to understand what they mean, which is different from what they show. You have long conversations with colleagues that are half technical, half philosophical, and occasionally veer into territory that you would not describe in a public forum. The questions you are working on about reasoning, about planning, about what it means for a system to have genuine understanding versus statistical mimicry, do not have clean answers. You are not paid to have clean answers. You are paid to push the frontier, which means by definition you are always working at the edge of what is understood. At this level, you also start to encounter something the company doesn't put in any official documentation, but that shapes every significant decision: the acceleration problem. xAI is moving faster in some capability benchmarks than its competitors. And there is a version of that speed that is thrilling, and a version of that speed that requires you to hold 2 thoughts simultaneously. 1, that you are working on transformative technology, and 2, that transformative technology has historically had consequences that were not fully anticipated. How you sit with that tension is, at this level, a significant part of the job. Nobody manages it for you. Level 4, Principal Engineer. The job title says engineer. The actual job is closer to something that doesn't have a clean name. At this level, You are one of somewhere between 30 and 50 people in the entire company whose technical opinion Elon Musk will, in the right context, actually listen to. Not just acknowledge. Listen to, and potentially change course based on. That is an unusual form of leverage to have, and it comes with an unusual form of pressure. Your compensation is somewhere between $1.5 million and $3 million per year, depending on performance and equity pricing. You live almost certainly in Austin. You may own a house there. You own equity that, in the event of an IPO or liquidity event, would put you in a category of wealth that is genuinely difficult to spend in a single lifetime without effort. But here is something interesting about money at this level. It largely stops being motivating in the way it was at level 1. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon, and you are living it in real time. The marginal utility of additional money above a certain threshold flattens dramatically. You are not indifferent to compensation. You would notice if it dropped, but you are not spending significant mental energy optimizing for it anymore. What you are optimizing for is harder to name. Significance maybe. The sense that the specific problems you are choosing to spend your finite cognitive life on are the right ones. The problems at this level are enormous. You may be architecting the systems that determine how the next generation of Grok processes multimodal inputs at scale. You may be leading the team that is working on Grok's reasoning capabilities, the systems that allow the model to not just retrieve information, but to generate novel chains of inference. You may be working on something that doesn't have a public name yet, something that will appear in a press release in 18 months and cause a significant news cycle. The other thing that happens at this level is that you start having relationships outside the technical organization that you didn't have before. You talk to the policy team. You talk to legal. You occasionally appear in conversations with investors or partners or journalists in a carefully managed capacity. You understand xAI not just as a technical project, but as an entity that exists in the world, with stakeholders and consequences, and a public reputation that is deeply entangled with one of the most famous and controversial people on Earth. That last part, the Elon variable, is something every person at this level has made a private peace with. You are building the most powerful AI system that this company is capable of building, and that company is led by someone whose opinions, public statements, and management style are a lot. Some days it is energizing. Some days it is exhausting. Some days you are in a team meeting, and someone reads a tweet from the CEO that is directly relevant to decisions your team made last week, and the meeting pauses for a moment, and then everyone continues. You adapt. You have to adapt. The work is too important to you, to the company, to the field, to let the noise be the reason you stop. Level 5, Director. You are not writing code. This is a cultural loss you have made some version of peace with, probably 2 or 3 years ago, but that you revisit occasionally when a particularly elegant engineering decision gets made by one of your reports, and you feel the ghost of the technical work you used to do. Your job now is architecture in a different sense. You are architecting the organization, the research agenda, the hiring priorities, the team structure, the resource allocation across projects that are all simultaneously important and that have more compute needs and more personnel needs than you currently have budget to fulfill. Every week involves making choices about what does not get done, which is the part of leadership that nobody describes accurately in job postings. You run an organization of somewhere between 50 and 300 people, depending on your scope. The people below you are extraordinary. This is, objectively, one of the highest density concentrations of AI talent in the world, and managing extraordinary people is categorically different from managing ordinary people. They don't need motivation. They need direction and resources, and a clear sense of how their work connects to the things that actually matter. Your job is to provide that. On the days you do it well, you can feel it in how the organization moves. On the days you do it poorly, you hear about it in ways that are sometimes direct and sometimes involve someone's retention package at a competing lab. Your total compensation is between $3 and $8 million per year. You have, at this point, meaningful wealth, not the kind of wealth that warrants a private jet, but the kind of wealth that warrants estate planning conversations and a financial advisor who is also, technically, your friend now. You own a significant stake in xAI. An IPO, when it comes, and the market expectation as of 2026 is that it is coming, would change your financial situation in a way that requires genuinely new categories of thinking. You are having conversations about the future of artificial intelligence that are not hypothetical. They are operational. When you discuss the capabilities of the systems your organization is building, you are discussing things that exist, that are running, that are already having effects in the world that most people don't fully perceive yet. You understand that Grok as a public product is a fraction of what the research organization is working toward. You understand what the next 2 years of capability development look like, in general terms, in a way that the public does not. This knowledge is not always comfortable. Level 6, the inner circle. There are somewhere between 5 and 15 people in this category. The exact number is not public. Their titles may be conventional, VP, Chief Scientist, Head of Research, or they may be effectively titleless, known internally by their names and their areas, because at this level the title is the least important information about the person. These are the people who built the architecture of Grok. The people who made the foundational research decisions that determined what kind of system xAI is even trying to build. The people who, when Elon Musk has a question about whether something is possible, are the ones in the room with the answer. Their compensation is negotiated. Not from a band, not from a grade, but negotiated. A specific conversation between them and the company about what it would take to have access to their specific brain. The equity component of these packages, at xAI's current private valuation of over $100 billion, is generating paper wealth at a rate that is genuinely difficult to contextualize. Not Elon-scale wealth, but generational wealth. Wealth that, if managed with any competence at all, will outlive them. But that is almost beside the point at this level, because the people who made it here are not primarily motivated by money in any form that money usually works. They are motivated by the problem. Specifically, the problem of what intelligence is, what it can become, and what happens to the world, this world, our world, the one we all currently live in, when the answer to that question stops being theoretical. These are the people working on what the company's internal language sometimes calls the next generation of reasoning. Systems that don't just process information but plan, adapt, generalize in ways that current systems cannot. Systems that, depending on who you ask and how honest they're being, Our one or two capability jumps away from something that changes the fundamental relationship between human intelligence and machine intelligence. They work long hours. Not because anyone requires it. At this level, no one is tracking their hours, but because the problem requires it. They go home eventually. They have families, some of them. They cook dinner. They watch their kids play. And then they come back the next morning to a building in Austin, Texas, where no windows let in the outside light, and they work on what may be the last invention humanity makes before invention itself becomes something we share with systems that are no longer tools. Whether that's the most exciting sentence you've ever heard, or the most terrifying, probably depends on who you are and what you value, and how much you trust the people in that room. Level 7, the truth. Here's what's true across all 6 levels. xAI is not a normal company. It is not offering normal jobs with normal stakes. Every person in that building, from the 24-year-old debugging CUDA errors to the researcher who designed the architecture of Grok, is participating in something that doesn't have a clean precedent. The compensation is remarkable, yes. Genuinely, historically remarkable. But the compensation is almost a distraction from the more fundamental thing, which is that these are the jobs that will define what the next era of human civilization looks like. You can debate whether that's true. You can debate whether the people at xAI are the right people to have that responsibility. You can debate whether any private company should have that much influence over that much of the future. But while you're debating, that building in Austin is still running. The lights are on. The compute clusters are spinning. And somewhere inside, someone just shipped another piece of the last invention.